A large village sprawled near the edge of the forest, bordered on the other side by a swift river. The scenery was beautiful, the people fairly kind, but every place has its flaws. Mornings began here like in any other village. People woke up, tended to their livestock and gardens, and gathered for work. Evenings saw them returning home, spending quiet nights with their families around large tables. But in one yard, everything was different. A tall, slender woman, whose voice could shatter glass, was yelling again at a boy who seemed to attract trouble like a magnet. "I told you to clean out the chicken coop," Leslie shouted. Her high-pitched, almost squeaky voice echoed through the village. Everyone knew the boy was getting another earful because of Leslie's rather unforgiving nature. "I already did everything," the boy exclaimed. But he knew arguing was futile. When Aunt Leslie started shouting, nothing could stop her, and there was hardly a chance to get a word in edgewise. He would have been glad to get away from her, but with his parents gone and himself dropped onto her lap, he had created more problems than she could have ever imagined. Carl remembered vividly how he came to live in this house, and how Aunt Leslie had sobbed, begging the social workers to take him away, only to seemingly resign herself later, shedding fewer tears. From a simple city boy, Carl had turned into a child who only catered to a rather critical aunt, spending all his time on chores without even attending school. Leslie was strictly against schooling, fearing he would make friends there. Even worse, he might spend too much time away from home, neglecting his chores. Everyone in the village had argued with her at some point, but influencing her was impossible. Even now, as she stood there, cheeks puffed out, eyes bloodshot, she looked terrifying. "You ungrateful boy. I took you in, did everything for you, even after your wretched mother abandoned you. And what do? Can't even clean out a chicken coop properly? Useless. You're as lazy as your father." Leslie yelled, grabbing him by the collar and throwing him out onto the street, telling him not to come back today. Carl had grown accustomed to spending nights on the street occasionally, but lately he had been going to his grandmother's nearby. She was always ready to feed him, shelter him, even when Aunt Leslie kicked him out into the bitter cold. It was cold outside now, but not yet freezing. However, without a jacket or sweater, and simple shoes, he quickly realized he would freeze here, meaning he would have to go to his grandmother's. Carl trudged down the street, glancing around, feeling utterly lost and tired. The constant yelling, the lack of school he missed so much, all frustrated him. He didn't know how to deal with Aunt Leslie, and he didn't know how to get back to the children's home where life had been much better than here. Nobody paid him any attention. As the day moved towards evening, tired people returned from work, some tending to their farms, others simply drinking away their worries. None of this mattered to him. He just didn't know how to find someone who could help him get back to the city and back to school. Losing his parents had affected him not only emotionally but visibly as well. From a cheerful, happy boy, he had turned into a gloomy child who didn't see anything to be happy about in life at all. "Grandma Gwen, can I stay with you tonight?" the boy asked, approaching a low wrought iron fence behind which an elderly woman was trimming bushes. "Of course, Carl, of course. Come in, we'll trim these bushes and then go inside for dinner," said Grandma with a smile, looking at him, letting him know she didn't mind another night of him staying over. He started trimming the bushes where Grandma told him to. Leaning on the fence, she watched him work. At the same time, she thought about how, when she died, the boy would be completely alone. She felt sorry for him because she herself had been left without parents at his age. Watching him struggle to survive in this situation made her feel uneasy. She had been taken to the children's home right away, but that hadn't brought her happiness. "Grandma Gwen, do you know how to get to town so they'll let me on the bus?" Carl asked, when they were already sitting in the kitchen and he was helping his grandmother set the table. "Why do you need to go to town? Or do you think you can live in the city by yourself?" "It won't work, it's not done," said Grandma Gwen, sadly smiling, realizing that the boy just wants to escape from under the supervision of aggressive Leslie. "I want to get to the children's home. I'll go there, write an application, and they'll take me in, so I won't have to endure her anymore. And I won't have to listen to how she, poor thing, is tired of me and how she performed a great deed by taking me in. Although I remember perfectly well that she didn't choose to take me, I was literally pushed onto her," the boy said, shrugging. "I really don't understand why she doesn't just send me there herself if I annoy her so much. Because she gets support money for you. And because without that support, it would be difficult for her. So, nothing surprises me anymore. But I'll tell you this, it's better to endure now than to end up in a children's home. Believe me, you can't even imagine how hard and scary it is there," Grandma Gwen said, placing her wide hand on his head. She tousled his snowy white curls. The boy smiled, remembering how his mother used to do that often. He looked out the window, where it was almost completely dark, and thought that he definitely wouldn't last until morning outside. He looked gratefully at his grandmother. She smiled back at him. Taking advantage of the moment, he decided to ask Grandma about everything that interested him. "Listen, Grandma, where do you think my parents are?" he asked her, deciding not to accept the idea that his parents were gone. "I don't know," Grandma Gwen said, shrugging, also staring out the window, as if her scattered vision could help her focus on this question. "I saw your parents only a few times when they visited your sister when they were selling the house here. I saw that your mother loved you very much. Well, and I saw that your father was trouble wherever he went." She fell silent for a while, apparently deciding not to say what was on her mind. She bit her lip, looked out the window again, then at the boy, and then lowered her gaze to the table, as if overcoming herself. "Maybe your mother is alive. Of course, maybe she's out there making a new life from scratch. But your father is unlikely to be alive. Don't be offended, but I remember him poorly, except for the fact that he found trouble everywhere. And we, women, had to clean up after him," Grandma Gwen said. The boy chuckled, looking at her. She smiled back, and then they went together to watch TV, as they often did when the boy stayed over. Grandma Gwen sat in her armchair, watching him watch the show, and saw that he was in pain and scared, that he was feeling bad, that he was really ready to go to the children's home just so he wouldn't have to stay with that crazy aunt who not only lacked common sense, but also prevented him from getting an education. Grandma Gwen felt sorry that such a smart boy couldn't even try to get a proper education because his aunt was literally destroying that possibility, making him work for her all the time. She wished the boy could have a future, and perhaps his desire to go to the children's home would be much more informed and correct than she advised him to just endure and wait until the situation changed a bit. The next day, Carl came home, did the work his aunt assigned to him, but all the time remembered that happy evening at Grandma Gwen's, which was not the first, and he hoped it would not be the last. He was glad Leslie wasn't around, so taking advantage of almost the only opportunity, he decided to finish everything fairly quickly, and then escaped to go to the forest and see what kind of clearing had formed, which all the local boys talked about, which he had not yet seen, although he really wanted to see. When Carl finished all the work, he looked critically at the door, quickly retired, and headed to the forest to see for himself the very clear that formed after the storm. He was full of anticipation. He wanted to get to the place as soon as possible to see with his own eyes this pile of branches, which were kneaded with mud, leaves, and silt. He entered the forest, and immediately he felt calm and good, as if the forest with its air and rustling leaves was soothing him. Every time he came into the forest, he felt calm, good inside. but the sound came again, urging him to move forward. He was completely lost now. If he had known what he would find, he probably wouldn't have ventured deeper into the thickets alone and would have likely returned to the village to find an adult. Finally reaching a massive ancient oak tree, which had surely stood here long before people arrived, he was astonished. Carl saw a woman tied to the tree in a position that suggested she had not yet realized this encounter would change both their lives. He approached her, placed his palm on her neck, and felt a pulse, realizing she was still alive. She lifted her head and emitted a faint groan. He understood she was barely conscious, and the thought scared him. Someone had brought her here, someone had even tied her up, leaving her to starve or be eaten by the wild animals that roamed plentifully in the forest. "Miss, can you hear me?" "Do you hear me?" the boy asked the unfortunate woman, but she hardly responded. He realized he wouldn't uncover the truth until she came to her senses and he got her out of there. He untied the soggy ropes, and she awkwardly slumped forward, nearly falling, but he caught her, immediately feeling the weight of her body and realizing he might struggle to get her out of there. Carl seated her under the tree and knew he didn't have time to go to the village to find someone to take her away. He went to the lumber pile and returned with a makeshift sled he had found there, tied a rope to it, laid the nearly unconscious pregnant woman on it, and harnessed himself like a draft horse, dragging her forward, straining every muscle, aware that he wouldn't be able to get her home unless she became lighter. When he dragged her out of the forest, the metal plate, probably an old door of a large vehicle or maybe a twisted sheet of metal, settled in the mud, making it much easier to drag the pregnant woman. But he couldn't bring her all the way home, so he brought her to Granny Gwen's house. Seeing what the boy had brought, she immediately asked him to help bring the woman inside. Carl felt much calmer when he saw the woman already on the couch. She soon lost consciousness. She was so thin, yet she had a rather large pregnant belly, creating a dissonance. "Go home, Carl. Don't tell anyone. Who knows, maybe one of ours dragged her into the woods. You're still young, you won't understand how terrifying it is for women to live with such men lurking around, waiting for any excuse to mistreat them. If you want to help, come back later. Don't bother Leslie unnecessarily, or she'll suspect something's wrong," Granny Gwen said, giving the boy guidance before he left for home. Carl came quite often and saw that the unfortunate woman was improving day by day, literally getting back on her feet, always grateful to the boy. She was always glad to see him there. "Such a brave boy, so young," said the pregnant young woman, patting his head. But when her expression turned serious again, he knew she needed something from him. "I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life for rescuing me from such trouble. But I still need your help. And I'm afraid I won't manage without you. I wrote a letter because there's no communication here. I want you to take this letter to the post office, but don't tell anyone. Just drop it in the box. Don't send it yourself, just don't forget to put stamps on it. I'll give you money." He nodded, took the letter from her, and took it to the post office. After sealing it and selecting the stamps she instructed, he quickly left the post office building, trying not to think about why or what he was sending, because curiosity was starting to consume him. But he knew it wasn't his business. He glanced back at the post office building once more, deeply pondering what this woman might need. Unaware of how quickly he had returned home lost in thought, he immediately noticed another man with Leslie, with whom she was heavily drinking, realizing there was no point in returning home because he was always driven away in such a mood. Apparently, he hindered her from building a personal life. Although he himself didn't understand how he hindered her, because all these men just came and went. None of them wanted to stay here for too long. When he returned, he spoke again with that same girl. She laughed at something, telling Granny Gwen, and it was all so sweet and calm that he himself wondered how he could have survived in that family when he was much happier here. Poor boy. Life is hard for him, especially so young. It beats and beats with new force. And he, you see, endures and pulls through, Granny Gwen said, when Carl had already left and long since fallen asleep in his bed. Isn't he your grandson? Asked the pregnant young woman, placing her hand on her belly as if to soothe herself. No, not at all. I've only seen his parents a couple of times, but that was enough to understand that his mother is the only decent one. His father, on the other hand, leaves much to be desired. At some point, and I don't even know how it all happened, but apparently it was understood that he had no parents, and they disappeared overnight. He was initially placed in an orphanage, then brought to his aunt. This aunt cried her eyes out, begging for the boy to be taken away until they told her they would provide assistance. Only then did she pretend she was glad to take him. But instead of love and care, she constantly mistreats him. She even forbids him from going to school, making him clean her yard and watch over the animals in his free time, Granny Gwen said. Then it's clear why he visits you so often, the pregnant woman said sadly. And Granny Gwen managed a sad smile. She throws him out onto the street. Rain or shine, she couldn't care less. If she feels he's misbehaved or if there's a chance for Leslie to have her personal life, she throws him out. And when he ends up on the street, it takes him a lot of courage to come to me, though I'm always glad to see him. It's just heartbreaking that such a good boy languishes here simply because his aunt likes receiving assistance, Granny said sadly, realizing that this conversation was unlikely to change anything. She couldn't talk about it with anyone in the village. And this girl would leave sooner or later, as she had her own family and life. By the way, after being rescued, this pregnant woman never once talked about herself. Therefore, it was not surprising that neither Granny Gwen nor the boy knew anything about her. The difference was that Granny Gwen wasn't interested in anything from her past. She understood that if she wanted to share something, she would. And if she didn't want to talk about it, she had her reasons. Carl, on the other hand, was much more curious than Granny Gwen, and he would have given a lot to know what had happened in the life of this unfortunate woman, how she ended up tied to a tree in the forest while pregnant. He was terribly curious about what had happened, as if a plot from some intense action movie had unfolded right before his eyes. But no matter how often Carl visited Granny or spoke with the mysterious young woman, she had no intention of revealing anything. She could talk about her past, about childhood things, where she worked, what she did, but she never mentioned how she ended up almost lost in the depths of the forest, tied to a tree. Eventually, Carl didn't lose interest in what had happened, but he stopped hoping he would ever find out anything. And even as he saved her, he didn't suspect how drastically his own life would soon change, as he never imagined such changes were possible. The next morning, Carl woke up in his aunt's house. He heard Leslie nervously whispering to someone. Leslie was speaking in a loud whisper, and he didn't know why because usually Leslie didn't hold back her words or emotions, even if her nephew was fast asleep. And where did they all go? Look at that whole convoy. So many cars. Selling just one of those cars could buy half the village. Leslie complained again. Carl got out of bed, approached the window, and when he saw a whole convoy of expensive, almost identical dark cars passing by down below, he somehow immediately knew they were headed to Granny Gwen's and most likely would take the pregnant woman from there. He didn't know where these conclusions came from, but he was sure he was right. He hurried downstairs, walked up to the veranda, climbed onto the roof of the flower bed, and saw that the cars had indeed stopped near Granny Gwen's. A few minutes later, Granny Gwen was hugging the woman, placing her hand on her belly, saying something, then seating her in a car, waving goodbye, and disappearing back into the house. Seeing such warmth, the boy immediately understood that this pregnant woman had probably shared with the old lady what had happened to her and why she ended up tied in the forest. Carl also realized that the letter he had sent was likely a plea for help because hardly anyone could have known where she was unless she had somehow signaled it herself. When Carl saw the cars leaving, he felt a surge of emotion inside him. How painful and sad it was that he wouldn't see this woman again, and that everything would go back to the way it was before. Every time he visited Granny, every time he saw this young woman, he always felt like his life was about to change, even though he couldn't explain these changes. And now that she was gone, he realized there was no hope for any change. "Why are you standing here? Don't you have enough work? Come on, get dressed and go to the barn. Hurry up, you need to clean the stall. They're bringing another cow today," Aunt Leslie said roughly, pulling a phone out of her pocket, seemingly out of nowhere, although there was hardly any reception here. The only spot where there was any signal was on the hill, and even then, only if you sent a message from up there, tossing the phone into the air. Carl didn't argue with his aunt. He climbed down from the roof of the flower bed and went to attend to the chores assigned to him. While he worked, he had no idea that right at that moment, while he was busy with all these tasks, happiness was literally about to burst into his life, though he had no inkling of it yet. He could hear Leslie arguing with someone. The person with her clearly wasn't pleased, because the argument was intense and personal enough that their voices carried beyond the yard. Carl knew that the nosy neighbors still at home would likely crawl out of their houses to eavesdrop on the scandal brewing in Leslie's yard, disliked as she was. "What makes you think I owe you anything?" protested the man. And she, upon hearing him, suddenly squealed in apparent disbelief. "You said everything would be fine, that if I took out a loan, you'd get a divorce, that everything would be okay," she yelled. But from her tone, it was clear she was already desperate, likely unable to prove anything to this man, and thus resigned to settling for less. The argument escalated more and more. Carl was almost sure a fight would break out any moment, especially since Aunt Leslie didn't shy away from raising her hand. However, it all subsided, and the man who was reprimanding her simply disappeared, leaving Leslie in tears. He had no intention of comforting her, because if he approached her, she would immediately turn on him, and it would end badly. The next day, the man returned. Another argument ensued. Once again, there were threats from Aunt Leslie. But the boy wasn't interested in this soap opera. He only thought about the unfortunate pregnant woman he had found tied to a tree in the forest. Lately, he often wondered if she had managed to return to a normal life, if she had found people who would help and protect her. When a car pulled up to the house, the boy was almost certain it was the same pregnant young woman. Even though he couldn't see her face or the car's license plate, and even though the make of the car was different from those that had come that day when she was taken away. "What the hell is this? What nonsense is coming to our yard?" Aunt Leslie exclaimed, rising from her old chair and stepping out into the yard. Almost simultaneously, from the car and at the same time, as Aunt Leslie descended from the porch, the same woman emerged. But now she looked much healthier and more beautiful, as if being in comfortable conditions had restored her will to live. "What do you want here?" Aunt Leslie asked roughly, not understanding where this girl had come from and what she wanted. "I've come for Carl," the young woman said. Aunt Leslie smirked immediately, then burst into loud laughter, showing her disdain for this visitor. "Great job. Now go back where you came from before I tear you apart," Aunt Leslie said, rolling up her sleeves, clearly ready to use force if necessary. But as soon as she showed aggression, another man got out of the car, much stronger looking than the young pregnant woman. He stood next to her, and now Leslie realized she couldn't compete with such a man. She stepped back, but still defended the entrance to the yard, clearly unwilling to give up the boy. You know, people like you shouldn't be trusted with children at all. You hit the boy, mistreat him. All for money? Aren't you ashamed? You're ruining his life, making him clean barns for you. And he's a living person, after all, the pregnant woman stated bluntly. Leslie, taken aback by her audacity, tensed up, glaring at her, preparing to physically retaliate because she couldn't win this battle verbally. Carl, realizing they had come for him, immediately rushed out into the street. Aunt Leslie grabbed his shirt, but couldn't hold onto him. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the boy quickly moved behind the bulky man. "Traitor, ungrateful wretch," Aunt Leslie said. And then, grimacing, she spat on the ground. "Knew you were a pig, just like your father." Leslie continued to argue a bit more, realizing she couldn't take the boy back. Convinced that it was over, she quickly entered the yard, grabbing her phone, clearly intending to call the police. The pregnant woman opened the car door, sat inside, and the boy took a seat in the back. The car started moving, and the boy, relieved that he would finally be taken away from the torment of this woman, was glad to see things were turning out the way he wanted. But Carl had no idea just how much everything would change. "Carl, I'm sorry, but we can't stop at Aunt Gwen's. She knows I've come for you. She knows you'd like to visit her to say goodbye. But we don't have time. We need to get out of here before the police arrive. Otherwise, they might send you back to your aunt before everything is sorted out, understand?" she asked, and the boy quickly nodded, indicating he understood and that everything was fine. As the car pulled away, the large driver turned on the radio. The boy understood it wasn't the best moment to talk or ask questions. Even though he had many questions, he had to make an effort to remain silent. As the car passed through one town, then another, he realized they were going somewhere far away. He felt both sad about leaving and relieved to escape this village, where there was only one person who was always ready to support him. They stopped near a huge building surrounded by a fence. They were allowed in at the reception, and the boy, still not understanding where they were, quickly realized it wasn't an orphanage or a children's home, as he was surrounded mostly by adults. But as they approached closer and he saw his mother standing at the entrance, he burst into tears, leaped out of the car before it even stopped, and ran to embrace her. His mother hugged him tightly, holding him close, never wanting to let him go again, even though she knew it was impossible. "Come on, time's short, gather your things," the woman said, still holding her pregnant belly, which was clearly causing her discomfort now. The boy glanced between the doors and the pregnant woman. She nodded to him, indicating everything was okay, that his mother would return soon. But he was so afraid she would disappear again that he couldn't sit still. Seeing how calmly and patiently the pregnant woman behaved gradually calmed him down. Though it kept him on edge, constantly looking around, fearing his aunt might call the police any moment. When she returned with suitcases, he immediately understood they would leave together, and it made him feel so warm and happy inside that he almost cried. But he held back so his mother wouldn't see how emotional he was, although she wouldn't have minded. He still remembered how she told him it wasn't shameful to show his emotions. When they got into the car, his mother held his hand tightly. He held onto her just as tightly, afraid to let go, as if something terrible might happen any moment. Thinking about his aunt's character, he feared she might indeed call the police. He imagined police cars chasing their gray car, flashing their lights and signaling them to pull over. They would pull over, take him away from his mother again, and leave him with his aunt. "I thought you were dead," the boy said, looking at his mother. But she just smiled at him, letting him know everything was behind them now. "Don't worry. Everything's fine now. When we're alone together, I'll tell you everything that happened." And believe me, I'm so worried you won't understand or accept it. So, I'll probably be very nervous before telling you anything, she said to her son with a smile. And he, smiling back at her, immediately told himself he would accept everything she said, even if it was a real blow to him. They stopped outside their home. The pregnant woman he had saved got out, knelt in front of the boy. Thank you, Carl. Not every man is capable of what you did for me. I was in a terrible situation. I thought I would die there, but you gave me hope. You saved me, you gave life not only to me, but also to my little one, who hasn't been born yet. But know that when she comes into this world, she will surely learn about her Savior, about the boy who wasn't afraid of anyone or anything, and who simply saved us. I'm giving you and your mother this house. I want you to live here happily, to go to school here, to have a happy life away from your aunt. We will take care of all the paperwork, so you don't need to worry. And you don't need to wait for the police or your aunt, who could easily show up here, said the pregnant woman. She smiled at him, and he, realizing that she was barely holding back tears, simply looked down at the ground, continuing to thank her. Very soon, he was alone with his mom. And he was truly happy because he could finally see her alive and well, could stay with her, and everything else lost its meaning for him. They spent every day together. The paperwork was already in progress. He could already go to school, but he couldn't tear himself away from his mother, whom he loved so much, because he had already resigned himself to never seeing her. And now she was beside him, holding his hand, and they were simply happy. Your father set me up very cruelly, and I ended up on the streets. He took you away from me, orchestrated everything, and placed you in a children's home, hoping that by the time I recovered, found a way back to a normal life, I wouldn't be able to take you back. It would torment me so much that I would just die of grief. When I found this crisis center, I learned that your aunt had taken you. But all my attempts to reach out to you, all attempts to find any way to you, always ended in failure. Because I constantly ran into people who said they would never give you up. Because I had no home of my own, no documents of my own, which I painstakingly restored afterwards, Carl's mother recounted when they were alone. And when this woman arrived, I immediately recognized that she was talking about you. And everyone was amazed at how much you didn't resemble your father. Naturally, thankfully. But is everything okay now? The boy asked, looking into his mother's eyes. She smiled at him, letting him know that everything was indeed okay. Lost in the forest, the child saw a woman tied to a tree. This meeting turned both their lives around. She escaped from her tyrant, started afresh, gave birth to a beautiful girl, and always remembered the boy who saved her, fearlessly bringing her to the village. As for the boy, he returned to the mother he had missed so much, having believed her dead all this time. One simple act of kindness completely changed the lives of several people and will forever remain in their memories.